You know that feeling. It's not quite sadness, it's not quite confusion, it's not anxiety. Not exactly. It's that strange, quiet, in-between state where you feel like you're hovering just above your own life, slightly outside yourself, like the ground you were standing on got soft and nothing feels completely solid yet. You're not falling apart, but you're also not quite together. And the most disorienting part? You can't explain it to anyone. Because from the outside, everything looks fine. But on the inside, something is shifting. Something you can't name yet. Maybe you've been there recently. Maybe you're there right now. Here's what I need you to hear before anything else. That place is not a problem. That strange, unmoored, I don't quite recognize myself right now feeling. It's not a sign that you're losing your way. Neuroscience has a name for what's happening in your brain during that state. Depth psychology has been mapping it for decades. And the women who've made the most profound, lasting changes in their lives, in how they think, how they show up, how they experience reality, almost all of them describe going through that exact place first. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly what that state is, why your mind goes there before reality changes, and what to do, and what absolutely not to do when you find yourself in it. Because the difference between women who come out of that state transformed and women who come out of it back where they started, it comes down to one thing. And we're going to get to it right now. Let's start by changing the story you've been telling yourself about that state. Most women I talk to describe it the same way. They say things like, I feel lost. I feel like I'm going backward. I feel like I've been doing all this inner work and I'm somehow further from myself than when I started. I feel like something is wrong with me. And I get it, because that state is genuinely uncomfortable. It doesn't feel like progress, it doesn't feel like growth. It feels like standing in a room where all the furniture has been moved in the dark. Everything familiar is still technically there, but nothing is where you expect it to be. But here's the reframe that changes everything. That state is not confusion. That state is liminality. Liminality, from the Latin word limen, meaning threshold. It's the space between what was and what will be. The territory you have to cross when you're transitioning from one version of yourself to another. And the reason it feels so disorienting is not because something is going wrong. It's because something very specific is happening at the level of your identity, your nervous system's deep model of who you are and how the world works. And that model is in the middle of being rewritten. Think about a caterpillar in a chrysalis. Inside that shell, something genuinely strange happens. The caterpillar doesn't just grow wings. It dissolves. Its entire body, every cell, every structure, every organized system that made it a caterpillar, breaks down into what biologists call imaginal soup. Formless, unrecognizable, completely between states. And then from that dissolution, something new organizes itself. The butterfly doesn't emerge from a caterpillar that held itself together through the process. It emerges from the willingness of the caterpillar to completely let go of its current form. That is not a metaphor to make you feel better. That is the literal architecture of transformation. Biological, neurological, and conscious. When you're in that strange place, that hovering, slightly outside yourself, ground gone soft feeling, your identity system is in its own version of imaginal soup. The old structures have been disrupted. The new ones haven't fully formed yet. And in that interval, you are more open, more permeable, more capable of genuine change than at any other point in the process. The women who understand this don't try to escape that state as fast as possible. They learn to work with it. The women who don't understand it do the very thing that interrupts the transformation right when it's most alive. And if you've ever felt like you were so close to a breakthrough, and then somehow ended up back where you started, I want you to stay right here. Because what I'm going to show you next is probably the missing piece you've been looking for. So what is actually happening in your brain and your consciousness when you enter that state? Let me give you the real map. Your brain, every second of every day, is running a predictive model of reality. It's not receiving the world as it is. It's generating an experience of the world based on everything it already knows, every pattern it has recorded, every emotional charge it has stored, every identity conclusion it has drawn from your history. Neuroscientists call this predictive processing. But for our purposes, what matters is this. Embedded inside that predictive model is a very specific identity blueprint, a deep, largely unconscious portrait of who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve, how people respond to you, and what reality looks like for someone like you. That blueprint runs below your conscious thoughts, below your intentions, below your affirmations and your vision boards and your journaling. It runs in the body, in the nervous system's baseline, in the automatic emotional responses that happen before you even know you're having them. Now, what happens when you start genuinely growing? When you commit to expanding your consciousness, when you do real inner work, when you start choosing differently in your relationships, your career, your sense of self, you start presenting your brain with information that doesn't match the blueprint. And the brain does something fascinating when that happens. It creates what researchers call a prediction error, a gap between what it expected and what it's now receiving. And in the process of resolving that gap, the identity blueprint gets temporarily destabilized. The old model doesn't update instantly. It doesn't flip like a light switch. It goes through a period of disorganization first, a window where the old structures are loosening and the new ones are not yet solid. That window is the liminal state. That is the strange place your mind goes before reality changes. It's not a glitch. It's not a setback. It's the signature of a system that is genuinely, structurally reorganizing itself at the deepest level. Here's the image I want you to hold on to. Imagine your phone needs a major software update. You press install. The screen goes dark. The familiar interface disappears. For a few minutes, there's nothing. No apps, no notifications, no recognizable landscape. Just a loading bar and a blank screen. If you didn't know what was happening, you might panic. You might think the phone broke. You might try to force it to restart, to go back to the old version, to do anything to make it look normal again. But if you understand what's happening, you do something completely different. You wait. You let the process complete. Because you know the blank screen isn't the end. It's the installation. The strange place your mind goes before reality changes is that blank screen. That's the installation in progress. That's your identity system doing the most important, most sophisticated work it will ever do. And here's what makes this even more significant. During that window, during the liminal state, the identity blueprint is more open to new information than at any other point. The predictive model is porously receptive. The system that usually resists change with everything it has is temporarily available for a new instruction, which means that state is not just something to survive. It is the single most powerful window for conscious, deliberate identity work that exists in your entire process of growth. But here's the part that almost nobody talks about. And this is what the research and the ancient traditions point to from completely different directions. Let's go there next. What I just described isn't a new idea. It's a very old truth dressed in new language. And the fact that it shows up from completely different directions, science, anthropology, and mystical tradition, tells you something important. This is not a framework someone invented. This is a pattern so fundamental to human transformation that multiple independent systems of knowledge arrived at it separately. Let's start with the science. Neuroscientist Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on how the brain constructs emotion and experience shows that the brain is constantly generating predictions based on past data, and that genuine learning requires the disruption of existing predictive models before new ones can form. The discomfort of the liminal state is neurologically real. It is the experience of a prediction model under active revision, and the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity, its ability to literally rewire its own structure, is highest during periods of constructive disruption, not during periods of comfortable certainty. In other words, the disorientation is the neuroplasticity. Now let's go to cultural anthropology. In the 1960s, anthropologist Victor Turner built on earlier work to describe what happens in every human culture during rites of passage, the transitions from one identity to another. He identified 3 stages that appear universally: separation from the old identity, the liminal phase of betweenness, and incorporation into the new identity. He wrote that during the liminal phase, the initiate is betwixt and between, stripped of the markers of the old self, not yet invested with the markers of the new. And he observed that this phase is universally experienced as dangerous, sacred, and extraordinarily generative. Dangerous because the identity is unstructured, sacred because it is the site of actual transformation, generative because it is the only phase where real change can happen. Every culture, across every continent, across thousands of years of human experience, built ritual structures around this phase. Not to rush through it, not to medicate it, to honor it and to work consciously within it. And then there's the quantum lens. In quantum physics, a particle in superposition exists in multiple possible states simultaneously, until it is observed. The act of observation collapses the wave function into a single, specific reality. Before collapse, all possibilities are live. After collapse, one has been chosen. The liminal state of identity is the human experience of superposition. In that state, you are not locked into the old version of yourself. You are not yet anchored into the new one. For a specific and precious window of time, between identities, which means multiple versions of you are simultaneously possible in a way that is not true at any other point in the process. The question is not whether the collapse will happen. It will. The nervous system will reconsolidate around some identity, the familiar one by default, or a new one by conscious choice. The question is whether you understand what's happening well enough to participate in which version gets chosen. Not from a place of force or willpower, from a place of intentional, embodied, conscious presence in the liminal window. And that is exactly what the practice looks like, because knowing the science and the history is the map, but the map is not the territory. The territory is the actual moment when you find yourself in that strange place, not quite sure which way to move. Let me show you the 3 moves that matter most. I call this the Liminal Activation Method. 3 specific moves for working consciously within the liminal window. Not pushing through it, not escaping it, but using it for exactly what it was designed for. Move 1. Name it without narrating it. The moment you recognize that you're in that strange place, that hovering, unmoored, slightly outside yourself feeling, the first move is to name the state without building a story around it. Most of us, the second we feel uncomfortable, immediately start narrating. We turn the feeling into evidence. This means I'm failing. This means it's not working. This means I made the wrong choice. This means I'm not as far along as I thought. The narrative is the hijack, because the moment you attach a story to the liminal state, you pull it into the familiar identity system. And the familiar identity system uses the story to reconsolidate around the old version of you. You just handed the process back to the pattern you were trying to change. The practice is this. When you feel it, say, out loud or in your body, I'm in the liminal space. My identity is reorganizing. This is the process working. That's it. That's the whole move. But don't underestimate it. Naming without narrating keeps the window open. It lets the process continue instead of shutting it down with a story. Move 2. Use the porousness intentionally. Remember what I said about the liminal state. The identity blueprint is more open to new information during this window than at any other time. The predictive model is temporarily permeable. That means this is not the time to distract yourself. This is not the time to scroll, to fill the silence, to stay busy until it passes. This is the time to bring in the signal you actually want the system to integrate. The practice is a specific kind of internal inquiry, not journaling, not affirmation, but a somatic question. You place one hand on your chest, you breathe slowly, and you ask, who is the version of me that is emerging right now? What does she feel like in her body? Not what does she look like? Not what does she have? What does she feel like from the inside? And then you stay with whatever comes. You don't analyze it, you don't edit it. You let the nervous system receive it as a real felt sense, however small, however fleeting. That felt sense is the new instruction being written into the system while the window is open. This is why so many women describe their biggest shifts as happening in the most ordinary moments. In the shower, driving alone, sitting quietly in a waiting room. It wasn't random. It was liminal. The window was open and something came through. The practice makes that intentional instead of accidental. Move 3. Anchor before the window closes. The liminal state doesn't last forever. The nervous system will reconsolidate. And the third move is about making sure it reconsolidates around the new signal, not the old one. This is a somatic anchor, a physical gesture that you perform deliberately at the end of your liminal practice. It can be as simple as pressing both feet firmly into the floor, taking one long breath and saying, internally or out loud, I am already her. Not, I want to be her. Not, I am becoming her. I am already her. That declaration, made in the body during the liminal window, lands differently than any affirmation you've ever said while standing in your old identity. Because you're not saying it from the old self trying to convince itself. You're saying it from the in-between, where both versions are simultaneously possible. And the nervous system hears it as a real instruction. Simple? Yes. Effortless? Almost never. Because there is a set of very specific patterns that will show up to interrupt these three moves. Patterns that are almost invisible until you know exactly what to look for. Here's what nobody prepares you for about working with the liminal state. The moment you start doing it consciously, the moment you begin to recognize the window and use it intentionally, a very predictable set of responses shows up. And they are specific to women, specific to this kind of growth work, and specifically designed by your nervous system to bring you back to familiar ground. Know them by name. Because named, they lose most of their grip. The first pattern, the urgency to resolve. The liminal state is uncomfortable, and women, especially women who have spent years being the person who holds things together, who manages, who makes things work. We have a deep, almost physical intolerance for things being unresolved. So when the liminal state arrives, the first impulse is to fix it, to make a decision, to take action, to do something that makes the ground feel solid again. And sometimes that impulse is disguised as wisdom. It sounds like, I need to take inspired action. I need to trust my intuition and move. I need to commit to something. But if the action is coming from the urgency to escape the discomfort, rather than from genuine clarity, you are not following your intuition. You are following your nervous system's alarm system. And that alarm system will lead you straight back to the familiar, every single time. The practice is to ask before you act. Am I moving from clarity? Or am I moving to escape the dissonance? That question alone can save you months of circular movement. The second pattern, reaching for external mirrors. The liminal state is a time when the internal compass is being recalibrated, which means it can feel genuinely unreliable. And the natural response to an unreliable internal compass is to look outside yourself for direction. You call a friend. You ask for opinions. You look for signs. You seek reassurance. And here's the problem. Not with connection or support, but with using external mirrors as your primary anchor during the liminal window. The moment you outsource your orientation to someone else's perception of you, you anchor the reorganization process in their identity map instead of your own emerging one. You need people who can hold space for your becoming without rushing to define it. That is rare, and until you find them, protecting the liminal state from premature external definition is an act of profound self-respect. The third pattern, the spiritual bypass. This one is the most subtle. It sounds like, maybe the universe is telling me this isn't aligned. Maybe this discomfort means I'm going in the wrong direction. Maybe I need to surrender and let go. Surrender is real. Alignment is real. But the liminal state will sometimes use spiritual language to do the same thing the urgency pattern does. Give you a reason to step back from the edge just when you were about to cross it. The question isn't whether the discomfort is a signal. It always is. The question is, a signal of what? And when you learn to answer that with precision instead of assumption, something shifts in you that goes far deeper than any single decision. It shifts who you are inside the process of change. I want to offer you a different way of seeing yourself, not the version of you that is trying to grow, not the version of you that is working on herself, hoping to get somewhere, measuring the distance between who she is and who she wants to be. A different version entirely, the woman who knows the liminal space from the inside. There is a quality that exists in women who have crossed enough thresholds to recognize the terrain. Women who have been in that strange place often enough to stop being afraid of it and start being curious about it. It's not toughness. It's not resilience in the gritting your teeth sense. It's something quieter and more powerful than that. It's a deep, earned trust in the intelligence of the process. These women don't need the ground to be solid every moment because they've learned something that can't be taught with words alone. It can only be learned by crossing. The ground always comes back. And when it does, it is always slightly firmer than before. The landscape is always slightly wider. The version of themselves standing on it is always slightly less afraid. Not because the process got easier, because they got more fluent in it. Think about the navigator. Not someone waiting at the dock for perfect conditions, but the woman who learned to read the wind and the current, and the subtle change in the color of the water. She doesn't need the ocean to be calm. She needs to know how the ocean moves. And that knowledge lives not in her head, but in her body. In thousands of moments of paying attention, adjusting, staying present when everything said to panic. That is what you are building every time you choose to stay present in the liminal space instead of running from it. Not just a new outcome, a new relationship with change itself. And this is important, because the woman who has that relationship doesn't just manifest differently. She moves differently, she makes decisions differently. She stops waiting for certainty before she begins. She stops needing the full picture before she takes the next step. She has learned to trust the intelligence of the in-between. That version of you is not far away. She is not a future self you need to earn. She is the self that emerges when you stop treating the liminal state as the problem and start treating it as the practice. You have already been in that strange place before. Many times. Think back to the moments in your life when you felt most transformed. When you look back and say, that was when everything changed. What was happening right before those moments? I'll bet you were in the strange place. Which means you have already crossed thresholds you didn't have language for. You have already done this without a map, without a method, without anyone telling you what was happening. Now you have the map. Imagine what becomes possible when you cross the next threshold on purpose. If something in this video resonated, if you recognized yourself in any of this, if something finally clicked about a state you've been in without knowing what it was, I want you to do one thing right now. Leave the word liminal in the comments below. Not because it's a magic word, because it's a signal to me that this landed for you, and to you that you are part of a community of women who are doing this work at this level of depth and intentionality. You'd be surprised how much it means to not be the only one. If you know a woman in your life who is in that strange place right now, who is hovering unmoored, wondering if something is wrong with her, share this video with her. It might be exactly what she needs to hear today. And if you want to go deeper into this work, if you want a structured system for working with identity, consciousness, and the specific mechanics of quantum level change, the Quantum Brain Protocol was built around exactly this. It's not more information. It's a protocol that takes everything we've mapped in this video and gives you a precise step-by-step structure for working with it in your actual life. The link is below. Take a look when you're ready. And make sure you're subscribed, because what's coming next builds directly on this. Let me bring this full circle. At the beginning of this video, I described a feeling, that strange, quiet, hovering state, not quite sadness, not quite confusion, not quite falling apart, but not quite together either. The place where the ground goes soft and nothing feels completely solid yet. I told you it wasn't a problem. Now you know why. That state is the liminal space, the threshold between the identity you have been and the identity you are becoming. It is the neurological signature of a system in active, intelligent reorganization. It is the anthropological universal that every culture across human history built sacred practice around. It is the quantum window where multiple versions of you are simultaneously available, and the identity that gets chosen is determined by what you do in that window. It is not a sign that you are lost. It is a sign that you are crossing, and the women who learn to recognize it, who learn to name it without narrating it, to use the porousness intentionally, to anchor the emerging identity before the window closes, those women don't just have better outcomes. They develop a different relationship with change itself, a fluency, a trust, an earned, embodied knowing that the strange place is not the obstacle. It is the path. You came into this video with one interpretation of that state. You're leaving with another. That is not a small thing. That is the beginning of a fundamentally different way of moving through your own transformation, one that works with the intelligence of the process instead of against it. The version of you who already knows how to navigate the threshold? She was always here. You just have language for her now. And the next time you find yourself in that strange place, hovering, unmoored, slightly outside yourself, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you are not lost. Remember that the ground going soft is the process working. Remember that you have been here before, and you have always come through. And this time, you'll know what to do. Go gently, go honestly, and trust the in-between. Now here's something I didn't get to cover today, and it might actually be the piece that explains why the liminal state shows up the way it does for so many women specifically, because here's a question I want to leave you with. What if your mind isn't the first place the change registers? What if the body knows you're crossing a threshold before your conscious awareness catches up? And what if that body knowing is showing up in symptoms, sensations, and signals that most women are being told to manage instead of to listen to? The next video is about exactly that. The somatic language of identity change, how the body communicates the liminal process, what those signals actually mean, and how learning to read that language transforms the way you experience and navigate every transition in your life. It is one of the most important and most overlooked aspects of consciousness expansion for women. Subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you there.